My life was fun, fulfilling and full until it wasn't anymore because of you. I had a wife who was my mistress and confidant until I no longer was, because of you. I used to be outgoing, fun and free-spirited, and now I'm not, and it's all because of you. Thanks to you, I don't have any of the important things I once had. Because of you, my life has become a dark shadow of the sunny bright future I once had. I know this all sounds very melodramatic, but every word of it is true. My life was going pretty well until about 18 months ago, and then everything went to hell. My name is Jason Patrick Riley. At 30 years old, I work or have worked as an accountant, efficiency, and troubleshooting consultant for one of the largest and richest independent oil companies in West Texas. I worked in Midland, Texas, although I traveled all over the country and sometimes all over the world for my boss. He hired me right out of college, and I became a generalist for him and his company. I graduated from high school and had to go to work full-time to help support my family. My family consists of my mom, my sister Sally, and me. My mom is a single mom and raised us all by herself. My drunken jerk of a father abandoned us 2 weeks after Sally was born. I was 6 years old at the time. We never heard from him again. Mom always managed to clothe and feed us and give us a decent place to live, but there was never any extra money. I started working part-time when I was 14 and haven't stopped since. I don't work now, but more about that later. At 6 feet tall and about 175 pounds, I was large for my age at 16. If I kept my voice down, I could pass for an 18-year-old. That's how I got my first job in the oil fields. I think Butch, my first supervisor, knew I wasn't 18, but I told him about my family and he hired me anyway. He wouldn't let me work on the rig floor, but I had a lot of other things to do. Basically, I did most of the work associated with the drilling rig. I rolled drill pipe into place so it could be lifted, carried bags of drilling mud to the mixer, made sure the catch basins had water for drilling, and did anything else that needed to be done. I worked the evening shift from 6 to 10 p.m. so I could go to school during the day. When I graduated from high school, I went to work full-time as a roughneck on the rig floor. By then I had grown to 6 feet 2 inches and added about 40 pounds, so I was tall enough to work on the rig. After 2 years of working as a roughneck, my mother's friend, Jared, decided I should become a driller. It paid better and wasn't as hard on your body as rough labor. You can work so many years as a roughneck that the grueling labor knocks you out. Jared was in his early 50s and had worked as a driller for 25 years. His face was covered in seams and wrinkles from the weather, and his hands showed signs of the abuse they'd been subjected to over the past 25 years. He walked with a slouch and limp due to an accident that happened on the rig about 15 years ago. He looked like he had been ridden a lot, and then some more. I worked the day shift and stayed to learn from Jared. After almost a year of working with Jared and under his guidance, I got my first job as a driller. The hardest part of being a driller, once you learn the technical aspects, is managing your crew. The Roughnecks are an independent group and must respect you before they will work hard for you. The first time I worked as a driller, I had an older crew and I was the youngest at 21. Being a new driller, I had to work the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. There was one old guy on the crew who wasn't going to put up with a young brat as his boss. Jesse was 28 years old and a rough veteran. The first time he challenged me, I told him to get to work or get off the rig. An exchange of words and threats ensued and the rest of the crew had to separate us. I gave as good as I got, but if it had gone on any longer I would have gotten my ass kicked. The tool driver, who was the head boss on the oil rig, sent Jesse home and took away his paycheck for fighting. Usually you get fired for fighting on a rig, but if he fired Jesse, he'd have to fire me too. Drillers on the night shift were hard to find, so nobody got fired. The next night I waited for Jesse before starting my shift. As he was getting out of his truck, I told him we had some unfinished business and it needed to be taken care of before the shift started. We went behind the tool trailer to talk. Our conversation was not taking place on the rig itself, so the supervisor had no say in what was going on. Jesse knocked me down 3 times, but I got up on the 4th and started attacking him again. He held up his hands and said, "I've had enough. I'm afraid I'm going to smash my hands into your face and I won't be able to work." "You win, Jason, let's get to work." I earned the crew's respect for standing up to Jesse and never had any more problems from them. I guess the rumor spread because I never had any problems with the other crews. A few months later, when Jesse found out I was drilling a well, he came to work with me. We became friends and had drinks together. 2 years as a driller made me realize there had to be more to life than oil rigs. West Texas weather sizzled you in the summer and froze you in the winter. Add to that thunderstorms, rain, lightning strikes, and the weather is no help to you. People always say the plains of Kansas are flat, but compared to West Texas they are hilly. Oil is often found around salt domes, and a salt dome 3 feet high stood out like a high hill on the West Texas plains. Storms and winds traveled for miles, and there were no hills or vegetation to slow them down. Besides, you had a dangerous job on an oil rig, and you can understand how hard that life was. Plus, rattlesnakes, scorpions, and spiders meant that an oil rig was not the best place for a career. At least not for me. I wanted to work smarter, not harder. I didn't want to end up like Jared in 25 or 30 years, bent and broken, with arthritis-stricken hands. Another disadvantage of working on a rig: once you started drilling, there were no days off. You worked 7 days a week after week, until the well was finished. I took a job that allowed me to work the night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. so I could go to college during the day. My schedule was set up so that my last class would end at 1 p.m. This gave me time to get home, eat, study, and get some sleep before I would get to work on the rig at 10. I kept up with my studies during the summer, so I graduated in 3 years with 2 degrees, one in accounting and business management and the other in computer science. The day after graduation, I started looking for a job where I could use my new degrees so I wouldn't have to work on oil rigs. Soon there was Billy Ray Jones and the Jones Oil Company. Yes, that was his real name. A lot of old guys in Texas had 2 names they were called by: Joe Bob, Billy Bob, Bobby Ray, etc., etc., etc. I guess it's because everything is bigger in Texas and one name isn't enough. Billy Ray had an ad in the local paper saying he wanted to hire a full-time bookkeeper/accountant, and I said yes. He called me and we met at his office on Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. This would give me time to get some sleep after the meeting so I could get back to the rig in the evening. I hadn't quit my job as a driller and I wasn't going to until I found something else. I gave him a typed resume and we discussed my qualifications for about 30 minutes. Then we spent another hour discussing my experience on the rig in oil bidding. He asked, "Why do you want to quit working on the rigs, since drillers make good money?" "Yes, but it's hard on the body. Someday I hope to have a family and I want to be able to play with my kids and maybe grandkids." I recounted how Jared was beaten and said, "I don't want to end up like that." Billy Ray knew Jared and hired him as a driller from time to time. "Let me think about it for a day or two and I'll call you and let you know about Jason," Billy Ray told me at the end of our interview. I found out later that he had called Jared, Jesse, and my mom to see what kind of person I was. I thanked him for his time and headed home to get some rest before starting my shift on the rig. It was an interesting meeting and I enjoyed talking to Billy Ray, but I really didn't think I would get the job. His secretary Judy told me that I was the youngest person to apply, and she seemed surprised that a big burly guy like me had applied for the job. 10 days later I received a call from Jones Oil asking me to meet with Billy Ray again. This time it was a Monday morning, around 9 o'clock, and when I entered the office, his secretary handed me a cup of coffee and ushered me into Billy Ray's office. He was on the phone and pointed me to a chair. Billy Ray picked up the phone and smiled at me. "I'm offering you a job as an accountant if you still want it, Jason. Here's the salary I'm willing to start at." He handed me a folder of papers across the table. I guess Billy Ray had been watching too much TV. "How about it, kid?" I was surprised by the job offer. I actually thought he was going to offer me a job as a driller on the new well we had talked about at the previous meeting. The written offer was about 10% more than I was making as a driller, and I no longer needed to work on the rig. "That sounds good, Mr. Jones. I accept the job and thank you," I replied. "How soon can you start?" "Probably in 10 days or so, sir. I need to finish drilling this well, and then I'll be free." "Couldn't they find someone else to take your place?" Billy Ray said, looking at me appraisingly. "Yeah, I guess you could, but it would slow them down until they could find someone. Besides, I gave them my word when I took the driller's job that I'd finish the well. And I don't like to go back on my word, Mr. Jones. I need you to start work midweek or I'll have to find another Jason. With that statement, Billy Ray dashed my hopes of getting out of the oil fields. After hesitating for a few seconds, I stood up to leave. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Jones, but I think you'd better find someone else. I gave them my word and I intend to keep it. Thanks again for the offer. Call me if you need a driller for a new well. I'll see you sometime. Billy Ray started laughing. Sit down, kid. You got the job. I just wanted to make sure you were a man of your word, and you proved that you are. You're the kind of guy I want in my employ. So go finish your well, and then come to the office and we'll get to work. Having said that, he picked up the phone and started making calls. I walked out of his office and I don't think my feet touched the ground all the way to my truck. For the first time, I had found a way to get out of that damn oil rig. I was ecstatic and looking forward to working for Jones Oil Company. When I got back to my house, my cell phone rang, and when I answered, it was my current boss. He offered me a day shift job on his next well with an increased salary. He said the way I handled Jesse and got the respect of that crew told him I could run any crew. I can't, Mr. Williams, I'm starting a new job right after I get this well to depth. I was just starting out as a driller, and they were starting to offer me some really good rigs and wells, but I wanted to get out of the oil fields. He asked, and I told him where I was going to work and why. Billy Ray is a good man, and I understand your desire to get better. Good luck to you, Jason. If you decide to get back into drilling, give me a call, okay? We had to change the drill bit that evening and that delayed us a little bit. To replace the bit, we had to pull out over 9,500 feet of drill pipe, replace the bit, and put the same amount of pipe back in the well. Thus, it was 12 days before I could report to Jones Oil. The well was turned in on the day shift, but I worked my shift helping to dismantle the derrick and rig so it could be moved to the next site. I finished my shift at 6 a.m., went home, had a snack, cleaned up, and reported to Billy Ray's office at 8 a.m. He heard that the well had done deep last night and grinned when I came in. Billy Ray told me to go home, rest for the day, and be back tomorrow morning by 9. I want you to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when you start working for me, Jason. The next morning I took my first step after working in the oil fields. I found I had 3 clerks and another bookkeeper working for me. About noon Billy Ray took me out to lunch and explained some things to me. First of all, my name is Billy Ray, and Mr. Jones is my dad. Next, I had several people to choose from for this job, most of them had more experience than you. Do you know why I chose you over someone else? By this time I knew Billy Ray and replied, probably because I look so good and you wanted to improve the decor in the office. I thought he was going to fall out of his chair laughing. Yes, that's one reason. But the real reason I hired you is because you know the oil trade from the field side. You've worked on rigs and you know what it takes to get a well running. It's not just numbers and you know it. I can trust you, you will look at the numbers and reports and realize if the well is worth the expense or if we are better off shutting it down and moving on. You will understand if the driller or operator is trying to blow smoke up my ass or if they are reporting true information. It was your experience on the rigs that was the deciding factor. Billy Ray told me I would be more than just an accountant, he wanted me to be a problem solver and a field expert. He wanted me to meet with geologists, drillers, and crews. I was to hire the best roughnecks, drillers, and tool chasers for his wells. Pay them more than they should, keep them fat and happy, but make sure they produced. I had to be a generalist and do what I thought was right to keep the profits flowing. 6 months into the job, Billy Ray gave me a raise. The raise allowed me to send more money home to my mom and sister. I saved the company a lot of money by being able to read the false reports that one crew was sending in and fix the problem. Jesse and his crew had just finished another well, so I fired that crew and hired Jesse. Those guys were able to finish the well within budget. I got a promotion, Jesse and his guys got a big bonus, and Jones Oil made money. It was a win-win situation. I had more time to socialize now that my job was a day job, and I started spending time on weekends at a few roadhouses in the area. Now that I had an office-type job, I could dress better. No more dirty jeans, steel-toed work boots and t-shirts. I wore slacks or jeans, a nice shirt and Dan Post cowboy boots. I looked pretty attractive, if I may say so. And then I made the mistake of falling in love. Marcia and Baudra was a tall little filly who caught my eye at the ranch, a Midland dance hall. She was about 5 feet 9 inches tall, so she was very well suited to my large stature, as I made sure when I danced with her. She had Texas strawberry blonde hair down her back and big brown eyes. One look and I was, if not in love, at least in love. From the first time we met, we hit it off and became fast friends. She was always tipsy, happy and ready to party until morning. Marcia and lived on a small trust fund inherited from her grandparents and didn't work, so she had plenty of time to recover from her late-night partying. By the way, it wasn't just the men of Texas who had 2 names, many women did too. Sue, Billy Sue, Bobby Joe, etc., etc., etc. We dated for about a year and I felt like I was falling in love. I say constantly because there were a few obstacles in the way during our relationship. Because of work, I had to travel every 4 to 5 weeks. I would visit drilling rigs trying to solve problems or just familiarize myself with the well. My trips usually lasted 3 or 4 days, no more. Even when I was away, it didn't stop Marcia and from going to the ranch and other dance halls. I didn't like it much, but I didn't pay much attention to it until the night I found her in the arms of some cowboy in one of the booths at the ranch. The old cliché, I'd finished my trip early and decided to surprise her. When she wasn't home, I realized she had probably gone dancing. If I catch her in one of the honky-tonks, I'll be a little upset. Just before I left on this trip, we had a serious conversation about her going out when I was away. She was certainly surprised when I approached the stall where she was cuddling with her cowboy. The young man and her were cuddling and his hand was resting high on her breast. She closed her eyes and opened them as I lowered myself into the stall across from them. "Oh my God," she said. The guy looked to be about 24 years old, just like Marcia Ann. She pushed the man away and said to me, "Hi honey, I thought you were still on a business trip. Why do people say such stupid things when they screw up and get caught? Obviously you thought I was still gone, or you wouldn't be here with Cowboy Boy, would you?" He bristled slightly. "Oh no, I'm not here with Johnny Ray. He and my cousin Julie are dating, and I just ran into him. You could have fooled me. I thought, judging by the hug, that you were together for the evening. Honey, he came over to say hi and it was just a friendly hug. Johnny Ray, this is my boyfriend Jason Riley, and Jason is Johnny Ray Tyler." The boy held out his hand for a handshake, though he looked a little nervous. I took his hand and gave him a very, 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 very firm handshake. His hand was soft and not used to hard work, obviously he wasn't a real cowboy. If he had thrown the rope with such hands, the skin would have been peeled off. Johnny Ray was a drugstore cowboy and had probably never seen a ranch in his life. He groaned slightly from the pain caused by my firm handshake, and I let him go. Does a friendly hug include Johnny Ray squeezing your tits? If I'd walked in a few minutes earlier, would I have seen a friendly kiss? And by the way, Johnny Ray is an ex-boyfriend. No. Jason, I'm telling you, nothing happened. We danced a few times, that's all. I thought you said he just came over to say hello, and now you're saying you danced. Which was what, exactly? I was born at night, Marcia Ann, but it wasn't last night. I know exactly what's going on here. Marcia Ann and I had been dating for about 3 months when I gave her the only thing I had ever gotten from my father. It was a necklace of gold nuggets he'd won in a poker game. Before he left, he asked me several times to return it, apparently wanting to sell it to buy booze. Even at 6 years old, I wasn't stupid, so I told him I'd lost it. I got punched in the face for it, but at least I still had the nugget. This necklace was something like an engagement ring for Marcia Ann. She leaned across the table, trying to take my hand, and I reached out and took the necklace off her. If she wanted to play around, I wasn't going to let her do it with my branding on it. When I grabbed it, she was shocked and Cowboy Bob decided to intervene. He grabbed my arm to stop me. "Son, you really shouldn't fall for this. She's not worth going to the hospital for," I threatened him. I guess the memory of the firm handshake and the look in my eyes made him believe it. He let go of my hand and sat back down. I'm sure you can make it home, Marcia Ann. Then I won't wait for you. Adios, children. About 3 blocks from the bar, my cell phone rang. I saw it was Marcia Ann and wondered if I should ignore the call, but decided to get it over with. Hi Marcia Ann, what do you need? Honey, come back and pick me up so we can talk. I came with Donna and she followed some guy and left me and I can't give her a ride. This conversation is over, girl. You were going to ride Cowboy Bob today, just have him take you home first. Don't call me again, we're done with Marcia Ann. Of course we talked again, and being young and stupid, I gave her another chance. I didn't really believe all the bullshit she was trying to sell me about that night, but I loved her and didn't really want to break up with her. That was the first time. The same thing happened when I went on another trip about 6 months later. I didn't catch her with anyone, but friends told me she danced each of the 4 nights I was gone. There's an old adage that says, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and that's exactly what happened to me. Of course, hindsight is everything and I should have toned it down after the first incident with Johnny Ray, Bobby Joe, or whatever his name was. I didn't learn from history and would have repeated it. After the last time we had a fight about her going out, she said, if we were married, I wouldn't have to go anywhere. We'd have a house and I'd be waiting for you there. Whether it was irrefutable logic or delusion, it worked. We got engaged and then promptly married. Our wedding was small, but the reception was large and held at the ranch because that's where we met. We went to San Antonio for our honeymoon and stayed at a hotel right on the Riverwalk. We never got to see much on the Riverwalk, we were too busy exploring each other. Neither of us were virgins, but we needed to figure out how we fit together and what each of us liked. A good time was had by all. I went back to work and was fortunate enough to not have to travel for a few months. Then I had to travel to Oklahoma for 6 days and nights. When I got home, Marcia Ann was trying to catch up on the first night I returned. The next morning at breakfast I asked her what she had been doing while I was gone. I was not happy to hear that she had gone dancing 3 of the 6 nights I was gone, starting with the first night. This led to our first spat, hell it was a spat, as a married couple. She still didn't understand why I didn't want her dancing with other men while I was gone. You never objected to me dancing when we went out together. You even let me dance with other guys. Why is it a problem if I dance when you're not there? Remember the times before we were married and the trouble your dancing caused when I wasn't around you? Now you are a married woman and you don't have to dance without your husband. When I am with you, I can protect you and support you. I don't want you to dance alone when I am not there. That seemed to put an end to her nightly outings when I wasn't home. For the next 18 months, my business trips were infrequent. On most, but not all, of the trips I had to take, Marcia Ann was able to go with me. We treated them like a mini vacation or a mini honeymoon. It was all good. Our second anniversary came around, and of course the gremlins decided that things were going too smoothly for me. I had to go to Mexico for 6 days, which postponed our celebration plans until we got home. Marcia Ann was not happy. She couldn't take this trip because I would end up in the middle of nowhere, in an oil camp in the middle of the jungle with no town or other women for 50 miles. Marcia Ann didn't understand or didn't want to understand that I couldn't tell my boss I wasn't going. She had never worked a day in her life and didn't understand what work was. This was only our second real fight, but it was a serious one. We both calmed down and spent the last few nights before my trip trying to love each other to death. She told me that she had decided to visit her parents, who had taken their SUV to Comanche Lake near Big Springs, Texas, while I was away. Marcia Ann said she would call me because she didn't want the ringing of her phone to interfere with her father's fishing. She called me the first night I was there to make sure I got there safely. The call was mostly about how much we missed each other and couldn't wait for me to get home. She called every day I was gone. The main thing was to make sure they were daytime calls. When I got home, we were absolutely delighted with each other. She told me that she had spent the whole time I had been away with her parents at the lake. Our lives returned to normal, and I took Marcia Ann to dances every weekend. I would have preferred to stay home from time to time, but she had stopped going out alone, and I decided that justice was justice, let her have fun. We used to go to one of the dance halls around Midland, and Marcia and never missed a dance all night. If I got tired, she danced with her girlfriends and sometimes with a guy we both knew. She even danced with my former teammate Jared a few times. If a stranger asked her to dance, she declined, saying she was a married woman. Her response made me feel good, calm, and safe. Sure, I was calm and safe, and then the devil popped up to mess up my life. One morning, about 2 months after returning from Mexico, I ran into Jesse outside our office. He had stopped by to see Billy Ray about work on a new well that was going to start in a month. We walked over to his truck to have a couple beers and talk for a few minutes. He seemed nervous and a couple times he started to say something but stopped and then moved on to something else. Eventually I told him to spit it out. "Jason, there's something I want to tell you, and you're not going to like it. Just don't shoot the messenger, okay?" I nodded for him to continue. "I know you don't like Marcia and going to clubs without you, but when you were in Mexico, she was at the rancho every night. And I saw." He tried to continue, but I slapped him. He fell back against the truck and I yelled at him, "You lying piece of garbage." I started stepping on him again. Jesse wrapped both arms around me and held me so that I couldn't move. "We're not going in there again, Jason. I'm not lying." The others saw her too. "I didn't have the courage to tell you before, but it kept gnawing at me, and I figured you should know." I calmed down and apologized for hitting him. It was hard to believe Marcia and would do such a thing, knowing how I felt about it. And she agreed not to do it again after our last conversation about it. "That's not the worst of it, buddy," Jesse continued. 3 times during the night she went out with her boyfriend and was gone for about 45 minutes. Now I was really pissed off. Not only was she going out alone where a married woman shouldn't be, but going out with a man is not the best thing to do. Maybe they were just getting some fresh air, but not for 45 minutes. Her act wouldn't pass the manhood test. "Different guy every time," Jesse said. I didn't want to believe she was doing anything more than going out to get some fresh air, so one night I followed her. Marcia and this guy sat in the back seat of the Cadillac. I didn't go over to see exactly what they were doing, but I could see her legs raised up and she held out her panties to him as they got out of the car. I used my phone and took pictures of them getting in and out of the car and her legs were up in the air and she held out her panties to him. Now he hesitated for a moment and then showed me the pictures. I stood with my head down and my hands folded in my lap, trying hard not to throw up. Jesse helped me into the back of his truck and handed me a bottle of Jack Daniels. After a couple of swigs of the bottle, I was able to pull myself together. What are we going to do now, I thought. If Jesse's right, Marcia and I are finished. What are you going to do, Haas? He held out the bottle to me again. I'd given up whiskey, my father was a drunk, and I wasn't about to let this turn me into one. I don't know yet, but I'll do what you damn well please believe, I replied. Jesse and I went into my office and downloaded the pictures from his phone onto my computer. Do you know any of those guys she was with? I think I'd like to talk to them a little bit, one at a time. First of all, I don't know them, I think they're just Saturday night cowboys hanging around the ranch. Second, Jason, stop and think, you know none of them would be with her uninvited. It's all on her conscience, and while it would be easier on you if you kicked their asses, if you go to jail because of that bitch, she wins, Jesse advised me. That night when I got home, I told Marcia and that I must have eaten some bad tacos or something and went to bed early. I wasn't sure I could contain my anger, so I pretended to be asleep when she came to bed. The next morning I left before she woke up and went to talk to Billy Ray. He was not only my supervisor but also a good friend of mine. I explained to him what was going on and what I wanted to do. Are you sure this is what you want, Jason? Don't you want to talk to Marcia and first? No need for more blabbering, I have witnesses and pictures, and what can she say that would explain what she did? It was a rhetorical question, I really didn't expect an answer. Will you help me, Billy Ray? I really did expect an answer to that question. He picked up the phone and called the company lawyer. After telling him his intentions, Billy Ray listened for a minute and said, I don't care if you have to break your arm, do it. Bring the papers to me by the end of the business day today. Before I left the office, I printed out the photos and got the divorce papers for Marcia and to sign. It's amazing how quickly legal matters are resolved when you know the right people. Billy Ray knew the right people. Marcia and was surprised when I got home early. I know it's a cliché, but I told her I had to go to Oklahoma and would be gone for 2 nights. She helped me pack my bag and asked if I had time for some quick sex before I had to leave. Shaking my head, I left. She seemed a little upset when I didn't give her a hug and kiss before I left. Later I thought I should have done it so she wouldn't get suspicious. I spent the rest of the day on one of the rigs talking to Jared. Around 8 in the evening I got home and, as expected, Marcia wasn't there. I made myself comfortable in my chair with a cooler full of beer and waited for my precious bride to come home. The time was approaching 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was only drinking my 4th mug of beer when Marcia appeared through the front door. She was alone, and that was a good thing. I don't think I would have been able to contain myself if she had brought a boy toy home with her. Marcia locked the door and walked into the kitchen. She turned on the light and grabbed a beer. When she turned around, she saw the pictures I had spread out on the table. Her hair was a mess and her clothes looked wrinkled. "Oh God, no," she said. When she looked back, she saw me standing in the doorway and slumped into a chair. "Honey, that's not what is," she began. I raised my hand to stop her. "This is exactly what it looks like, Marcia Ann. That's my wife at the dance hall when she's supposed to be with her parents. This is my wife getting in the back seat of a car with someone other than her husband. That's my wife with her legs waving in the air. This is my wife giving her panties to some guy, again not her husband. Am I missing something? Am I missing something?" As I spoke, I could feel the rage and pain building up inside me. I threw the beer bottle at the wall above the sink and it exploded, splattering the kitchen with beer and glass. Martian shuddered and replied, "You were gone and I was lonely and it all happened on its own. I'm sorry." I couldn't believe she was going to use that old and tired phrase about it happening because I was gone. "That dog don't hunt, girl. I was gone one night before you started your little romances, one night, not a month or even a week, but one night." Yes, I said romances, plural. I know of at least 2 other guys. But I don't know how many. Did the other 2 just happen too? Anger fought my self-control, and I knew I had to get away from her. I went to the bedroom and carried the 2 suitcases to my truck. I packed them while I waited for her to come home. "Where are you going? Please stay and talk. We can get through this, it didn't mean anything. You didn't even wait 12 hours after I left before you went to the party. How lonely could you get in 12 hours? When I told you I was leaving, you were already planning your little affair." "No, it wasn't like that. I went for a ride and ended up at the ranch. I didn't plan it and I didn't do anything wrong." "I swear," she told me. Damn shame, but she's really pretty, I thought. We were doing well for a while. "I'll believe it if you do one thing for me, Marcia Ann. If you can show me this thing and prove your words to me, I'll unpack, stay and work it out." "One thing. Show me you're still wearing your panties. Or did you give them to the guy you were with tonight?" The way she slumped in her chair and covered her face with her hands answered that question. I threw the divorce papers in front of her and told her to sign them and take them to the lawyer. "I've been fair, we'll split what's in the savings and checking accounts and you can have the furniture and car. The house is rented, so it's not a problem, you can stay or go. It didn't matter because I left. I suggest you sign them. If you contest the divorce, you won't succeed. You know what the courts are like here. Women who commit adultery have a tough time in the divorce courts of Texas. This is still a good old boy state, and a cheating wife is treated about the same as a horse thief. It may not be fair or politically correct, but that's the way it is, and that's okay too." I moved in with Jessie for a while, and the first week away from Marcia was the hardest. The anger and resentment were still strong, but I missed her too. She called me every 2 or 3 hours on my cell phone and 3 or 4 times a day at the office. The first time she called my cell phone in office, I told her to leave me alone and sign the papers. After that, I refused to take her calls at the office and disconnected my cell phone. The new cell phone solved the problem of Billy Ray having to contact me when he or I was not in the office. It was the second week of separation, and Marcia Ann began waiting for me outside the company building. Judy would tell me which door she was at, and I'd duck out the other one. I know it's cowardly, but I wasn't sure I could control myself, and I didn't want to take the chance that I might punch her in the face. Finally, the situation reached a breaking point, and I told Billy Ray that I was going to take a trip to some of our wells in North Texas and Oklahoma. The trip would take about 2 weeks, and maybe Marcia Ann would realize that we weren't going to solve this problem. When I returned from my business trip, Judy brought me a letter from Marcia Ann. I started to throw it in the trash, but Judy suggested, heck, ordered me to read it. Judy was not to be trifled with, she was a force of nature. In the letter, Marcia Ann promised that if I gave her 30 minutes to talk, she would sign the divorce papers if I still wanted her to. I called Marcia Ann and set up a time to meet at my attorney's office. I'll give her 30 minutes and be done with it, I thought. I walked into the attorney's office at 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Marcia Ann was sitting in the conference room. The divorce papers were on the table in front of her. My attorney was present at the meeting and as a witness. I handed Marcia Ann the document across the table and said, "Sign the paper, Marcia Ann." "But you said you'd give me 30 minutes, she said pleadingly. "I don't trust you. I can give you time to talk and you refuse to sign, and we're back to square one." "I promise you, honey, talk to me and then I'll sign if you still want me to," Marcia Ann replied. "Yes, you promise, but you also promised that we wouldn't have anyone but me when we got married. You promised you'd stop going to the dance when I was gone. And you see how that turned out. Sign the damn papers, and I promise to talk. If I change my mind, we can tear up the papers." She signed the papers and I had the lawyer witness and notarize them. Then he left us alone to talk. "You wanted to talk, so come on, time's running out." I looked at my watch. For the next 15 minutes, Marcia Ann apologized to me. She said she was mad at me for going to Mexico for our anniversary and going to the ranch to piss me off. She kept saying she had too much to drink and just went to that guy's car for no reason. Then I got the response that it didn't mean anything, it was just sex. And I was the only one she loved. There was a lot more typical nonsense, but I let her talk and didn't interrupt her. Eventually she slowed down and stopped talking. "Are you done? Did you say everything you wanted to say to me?" She nodded her head. "Okay, now I want to tell you a few things. Before we got married, did Johnny Ray play with your tits in that booth too? Your past in those dance halls doesn't help me believe you. While I was in Mexico, you went out with at least 2 other guys, I have witnesses. Are they just for fun too?" I spoke in a normal voice, not yelling or screaming. My mom always told me that if you yell at someone, they will start to get defensive or yell back. They start thinking about how to defend themselves instead of paying attention to what you are saying. If your little escapade in the back seat of the Cadillac happened for nothing, what about the other 2 guys? If you felt guilty for what you did, why did you come back the next night and every other night when I was gone? And you know what the real blowback, the real tragedy here is? Marcia Ann sat across from me, tears streaming down her cheeks. She shook her head in response to my question. "You ruined everything I hold dear with you, or it just happened. You ruined our marriage. I can forgive you, but I will never forget. If we were together again, every time you didn't pick up the phone when I called, or took too long to go to the store or beauty salon, I would wonder if you were seeing someone. Every time I left on a trip, I wondered if you'd decide it was okay to go to the dance hall." I had to stop for a few seconds to regain control of myself. "Remember what your mom told you," I thought to myself. "You ruined my career and my home. I can't stay in Midland because everywhere I go, everything reminds me of you. Every restaurant, movie theater, and even dance halls will remind me of you. So I have to leave. But the worst thing you've done is destroy all my chances of loving someone else. I'm dead inside. I can't let anyone get that close to me again because of what you did to me. I'm afraid of getting hurt again." By this time Marcia Ann was really crying, but she was still listening to me. I stood up, looked at her, and headed for the door. "I won't wish you luck, but I hope you find what you're looking for. Maybe you'll find a guy who will agree to let you dance and be a whore. But it's not me, and it's certainly not me. Go to hell, Marcia Ann." I walked out, leaving her sobbing at the table. Billy Ray tried to talk me out of leaving, but he understood why I couldn't stay. He wished me luck, told me I could always come back, and handed me my last paycheck. He shook my hand and turned toward his office. I think there were tears in his eyes, too. Judy hugged me and kissed my cheek and told me to give myself a chance to heal and then come back to them. She definitely had tears in her eyes. Having already said goodbye to Jesse and Jared and packed my things into the truck, I stopped and spent a couple hours with my mom and sister, leaving her some money. They both knew what Marsh and had done and didn't try to talk me out of leaving. When I hugged my mom goodbye, she said, "If you run away from trouble, you can hide for a while, but every time you look over your shoulder, they're waiting for you. Go and calm down for a while, but you can't run away forever." She kissed my cheek and went back into the house. I promised to call or write them as I traveled. Then I pointed the nose of my truck to the west and started driving. I had decided to leave Texas and get out of the oil business. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do, but that last check Billy Ray had given me would allow me to last a few months. The check contained 3 months' salary and a hefty bonus. Because of you. It's hard for me to trust. Not just me, but everyone around me. Because of you. I'm scared. So, back to where we started. I had just turned 30 and was unemployed, looking for a light. Thanks to my last check from the Jones Oil Company, I had enough money to last me 4 or 5 months if I didn't spend it like an oil sheik. I headed west with a stop in Van Horn, Texas, where I spent a couple days. The next stop was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. After 8+ hours on the road, I was ready for a good meal and a good night's sleep. I wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere, so I spent a few days as a tourist. The Sandia Peak Tramway was a relaxing way to climb the mountain and admire the beautiful surroundings. I tried Tex-Mex dishes at a few cantinas and just relaxed for a while. I decided to go to California. I had never seen the ocean, and a little sunny fun might have been just right for this old guy from Texas. When I got to the Pacific Ocean, I was suitably impressed. Pictures and movies don't convey it all. For about 2 weeks I hung around the beach watching the waves. Mostly I watched the beach bunnies in their tiny little bikinis. Maybe I was emotionally dead and didn't want to get close to anyone, but I loved watching the hotties on the beach and in the bars by the water. While I was at the beach, Billy Ray called to inform me that the divorce was final. Legally, I was a free man. Many people don't know that California has several oil fields: Signal Hill, Santa Fe, Huntington Beach, and others. In the early 1920s, California ranked first in the nation in oil production. I talked to a few of the people Billy Ray had told me about and got a job with one of the companies. No, I wasn't a driller or a roughneck, but I was in the business of inspecting and preventive maintenance of wells ready for production. I figured I'd rather make some money than depend on Billy Ray's last check. 4 months I'd been working and knocking around the neighborhoods of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Southern California is beautiful, it has a great climate and some of the prettiest girls in the world, but it's not Texas. There is something about Texas that draws people home, even to the flat plains of the oil fields of West Texas. I decided I had run long enough and it was time to come home. There was no time frame, but I headed back to Midland. Leaving Los Angeles, I headed east on I-40 to Flagstaff, Arizona, and then turned north to visit the Grand Canyon. It takes more than 1 day to see and appreciate the canyon, so I spent 4 days there. I hiked down the canyon to Phantom Ranch, spent the night, and headed back the next day. Not an easy hike, but well worth the effort. I took the route back to Flagstaff and spent the night. The next morning, heading back west, I drove to Laughlin, Nevada, which is on the border of Arizona and Nevada. Laughlin has several casinos and is like a mini Las Vegas. I realized I was digressing a bit, but Laughlin might be a good place to spend a few days. It was lively, bustling, and full of people enjoying themselves. Maybe I could be like them instead of thinking about my ex-wife. I spent a couple days exploring different casinos, saw a few shows and tested my luck in Texas Hold'em skills. My first boss Butch and the guys from the first rig must have taught me well. I won a small tournament I entered. In addition to the cash prize, I got a spot in a much larger tournament that was starting the next night. The tournament was a $500 buy-in with a $10,000 prize pool. I didn't think I could win, but if I could get into the last 20 players, I'd be in the money and get my entry fee back. Plus it would take my mind off Marcia Ann. Once again, the lessons taught to me by Butch and crew proved valuable. I didn't win, but I placed third and won $3,000. The casino demanded publicity photos with the 3 finalists and the casino manager. I hit the jackpot again. The manager turned out to be my friend and former classmate Ron Nichols. After the photos, Ron invited me to have dinner with him in the VIP room. We had a good time playing catch-up. Ron wanted to know what I had been doing. He asked if I had left the oil rigs and what I was doing in Laughlin. I questioned him about the same thing, ending with how he became a casino manager. You know, I studied hotel management and business administration in school, and after studying and getting up to speed, the company sent me here to Laughlin, Ron explained. Now tell your story and don't leave anything out. I told Rod about my job at Jones Oil to answer his question about my time to retire from the oil rigs. I told him the rest of my sad story involving Marcia and over more Jack Daniels than I should have. By the end of my story, I realized I was in no condition to drive, so Ron got me a room at the casino hotel. Ron did say, though, that he hoped Marcia and would rot in hell or something. It's good to have friends. The next day we met for brunch and continued our old home week. What are your plans, Jason? I wasn't thinking about yesterday's tournament. I don't know what I want to do now, but this traveling gets boring fast. It's good for a vacation, but not for life. Not for me, anyway. We talked for most of the afternoon, and after I was able to rest for a couple hours, we went to dinner, again in the VIP section. Ron had invited a couple of lovely girls to join us, just for company, you understand. It was nice to look at the scenery, with no trees or mountains, but I wasn't interested or ready for anything more than a dinner companion. The ladies weren't professionals, they were Ron's playmates and he wanted to share with me. Like I said, it's good to have friends. Ron and the ladies left me at the bar after dinner and went about their business. I had another drink, left the bar, and went to the VIP poker room. I didn't need to watch the world from the bottom of a bottle, even if it was a bottle of Jack Daniels. I watched the games for a few minutes and then sat down for a $2,500 buy-in hold'em game. I was playing from my tournament winnings, so the buy-in hadn't shored up my bankroll from Billy Ray's check or the money I was saving from my job in California. After about 2 hours, I decided to call it quits and cashed in my chips. I had added another $8,000 to my bankroll. I went back to the bar for one more drink before heading to bed. Sitting at the bar was Julie, one of the cuties who had joined Ron and me for dinner. She smiled at me and accepted my offer of a glass of wine. We talked very pleasantly for 2 hours until we were alone at the bar. She offered to grab a bottle of wine and head to her room to continue the conversation. The next morning I woke up next to her in bed. She was lying on her back completely naked and stunningly beautiful. She was making such gentle noises that you could hardly tell she was snoring. I can't help but say it's a very good thing to have friends. After taking a shower, I kissed her goodbye as she lay in bed. Julie told me that she enjoyed our time together and invited me to come over again. Before I left, I was going to meet Ron for breakfast. It wasn't a relationship, just two healthy young men enjoying each other. Ron and I ate while I told him about Julie. She's just what I need to start rebuilding my ego. A really nice girl. He just laughed and said it was her idea to wait for me at the bar last night. I think she liked you the first time. Answer me one question, okay? Ron continued without waiting for me to agree. What the hell are you doing? The Jason I knew would never run away like you did. The Jason I knew would have stayed and rubbed that bitch's nose in it for what she lost. If you let her, all that shit will follow you around. Talk to me, buddy. I stared at Ron for a few seconds and then started laughing. You sound just like your mom, I said when I stopped laughing. She used to tell me pretty much the same thing. Your problems will sit on your ass until you turn around and face them. I didn't know you were so smart, Ron. We both laughed and talked as we finished breakfast. When I got up, Ron asked, "What are you going to do?" I'm going to take my friend's advice and go rub Marcia Ann's nose in what she threw away. I'm gonna go home and move on with my life. Thanks, Ron. If you're ever in Midland, give me a call. You're a good friend. Pointing the nose of my truck to the east, I headed back home. On my return home, I would stop by Billy Ray's and see if my job was still available, for I had been away for almost a year. If not, I could get a job as a roughneck or driller on one of the oil rigs and look for a chance to improve my life again. I could stay with my mom until I found a place of my own. History repeating itself, I guess. Maybe so, but I was tired of running away. When I got to Midland, I stopped by my mom's house first, and she invited me to stay with her for as long as I needed. The next morning, I was sitting on the hood of my truck in front of the Jones Oil store when Billy Ray arrived there. I had already gone in to see Judy, and she promised not to call Billy Ray so I could surprise him. When he pulled up in his Cadillac, he was talking on his cell phone and paying no attention to me. Billy Ray turned off his cell phone and got out of the car, taking about 3 steps before he saw me. He was so calm, there was no shout of greeting, no grabbing my hand to shake, not even a smile. An outsider would have thought that these two old guys had seen each other just recently. As Billy Ray passed me on his way to the office, he said, "Would you like a cup of coffee, Jason?" I nodded and followed him into his office. Judy was already putting coffee on his desk. She smiled at me, shook her head and smiled at Billy Ray's reaction to my return. Judy patted me on the shoulder and closed the door, leaving. For the first time, Billy Ray showed emotion. "Damn, I'm glad you're back, son. It's about time." "Well, I'm glad my return coincided with your approval, Billy Ray," I told him. "I need to bring you up to speed because in 4 weeks you'll have to take charge of the entire range. After that, you'll have to run it for about 3 weeks. There was my answer about my job still being open, there was no doubt about that. What does it mean to manage all this for 3 weeks? What are you going to do? I had no idea what he was talking about. I can't take the business with me on my honeymoon, can I, boy? Are you getting married? Silly question, why honeymoon if there's no wedding? Oh, did I forget to tell you? Yes, I'm going to marry Betty Sue Vollmer in a month and after that I'll be gone for 3 weeks. Maybe longer, I don't know exactly. Isn't that the widow who owns the cafe on Front Street? When did all this happen? Billy Ray explained it to me. He and Betty Sue had been dating, sort of secretly, for about 7 months. She had sold the cafe and the house and was going to move to San Antonio, but he wouldn't let her go. Billy Ray told her, "You might as well marry me and stay here, you know you'll still be traveling back and forth to see me." He admitted it wasn't the most romantic proposal, but it worked. I rented your old apartment when Marcia Ann left, and Betty Sue's kids can stay there while we're gone. They're old enough to take care of themselves. How old are her children, Billy Ray? How old is Betty Sue if she has kids who can take care of themselves? And how old are you? Kelly's about 25, and Jeff just turned 19. He's leaving for the Air Force in 3 months, so he won't be here long. The kids can live in that 1-bedroom apartment until he leaves, and Kelly can stay there afterward if she wants. She broke up with some guy in Austin after she caught him in bed with her roommate and decided to come home. As for Betty Sue, she's probably about 45, and I'm of age and know what I'm doing. Billy Ray laughed at his age joke. By the way, I need a best man, do you agree? He laughed again, seeing the surprise on my face, and took it for granted that I would say yes. Billy Ray was married to Molly for 30 years, but she left us a couple years ago due to cancer. It was nice to see him happy and busy doing something other than Jones Oil. On my second day back in the office, Billy Ray brought Betty Sue to introduce her to the guy who made it possible for the lovebirds to go on an extended honeymoon. She was friendly, funny and smart, as well as a damn attractive woman. She was 45, but in broad daylight she could pass for 35 and looked much younger by candlelight. We were just finishing up the pleasantries, "Nice to meet you, how are you, nice to finally meet you," and the like, when her daughter walked into the office. "Jason, this is my daughter Kelly, Kelly, this is Jason, Billy Ray's right-hand man," Betty Sue introduced us. I'm afraid I didn't make a very good impression on Kelly. I just stood there and didn't say anything. Eventually I nodded to her and sat back down at my desk. For a guy who was supposedly dead inside and had no interest in women, Kelly just stunned me. She looked like a younger version of her mother, but in boots and jeans. Long blonde hair, corn blue eyes, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, of course 2 inches of her height accounted for the boots she wore. Kelly was athletically slender, but not thin, but trim and muscular. She, like her mother, was very friendly, cheerful, and intelligent. Kelly turned to her mother and said, "If we're done with the wedding plans for now, Jeff and I want to go to the ranch tomorrow morning and hunt quail. Is that okay with you?" Betty Sue replied, "By all means go, but come back tonight, I have a meeting with the preacher and I want you there. You know how he annoys me sometimes, and with you there I won't throw him out the door." She looked at him thoughtfully, then smiled and said, "Why don't you take Jason with you?" My objections that I had just returned to work, that my hunting equipment was in storage, and that I didn't have the right clothes, Billy Ray brushed off. He said I wouldn't have any free time for the next couple months, so take advantage of this lull before the storm. Billy Ray went to his Cadillac, brought the shotgun and ammo, solved that problem and said all I needed was jeans and boots and I was all set. I guess I don't really have a choice. "Kelly, if you don't mind, I'd like to go with you guys," I told her. The next morning very early Kelly arrived at my mom's house to pick me up for the 2-hour drive to the ranch. Jeff decided not to go, so it's just us. "Is that okay with you, Jason?" I nodded, and we hit the road. The trip was enjoyable and we learned a lot about each other. No prying or deep discussions, just socializing between new friends. We had a good time that day, at least I did. I developed a respect for Kelly. She did everything with a grace and ease that I admired. I started watching her instead of hunting quail. Kelly got her portion of quail and I only got 2, but I had a great time. On the way into town, she and I talked mostly about the upcoming wedding in Billy Ray. Kelly liked him almost as much as I did. Although the wedding was the main topic, we learned a few things about each other and found that we had a lot in common. She loved to hunt, fish, camp, and ride horses. I enjoyed the same things. She drove me to my mom's house and as I was getting my stuff out of the car, she said, "That was fun, Jason, let's do it again soon." Kelly honked twice and drove off to meet the preacher. I dove headfirst into my work and over the next 4 weeks learned much more about the oil business than I had ever learned before. By the time Billy Ray got married, I figured I could handle the day-to-day work unless there were unforeseen situations. Billy Ray told me that his bride-to-be told him that he could call and have business conversations for an hour a day, but just not on weekends. This was a big concession on Betty Sue's part, but she realized that he needed to be kept in the loop on everything that was going on. During my training, Kelly and I did something together at least on the weekends. We would go fishing, hunting, or go horseback riding at the Vollmer Ranch for the day. Sometimes Kelly would meet me after the office closed and we'd have dinner. I was beginning to think that being a recluse and dealing with women might not be the best course of action. We talked about many things during our rides to and from the ranch and over dinner. I told Kelly about my failed marriage and the reasons for it. She told me about an ex-boyfriend in Austin. Kelly wasn't really upset about the boyfriend, they had only dated for 6 months or so. But she was very angry that he cheated on her with her best friend. We both had baggage, but mine was a little heavier, I think. The wedding day came, and I had never seen Billy Ray so nervous. The man who could negotiate multi-million-dollar oil leases was literally shaking in his crocodile skin boots. I gave him a shot of Jack Daniels to calm him down while we waited in the church narthex to take our place at the church entrance. Betty Sue was gorgeous in an ivory dress. It was not a wedding dress, but very formal. Kelly was her maid of honor and walked down the aisle in front of the bride. She was wearing another formal dress, but a deep blue color. This color accentuated her blonde hair and blue eyes. I know the bride is supposed to be the most beautiful on her wedding day, but in my opinion, Betty Sue had stiff competition in the beauty department with Kelly. Jeff walked his mother down the aisle. A great reception was given at the ranch. Perhaps now the place will evoke fond memories for me. A large contingent of oil rig workers gathered by invitation, including my old friends Jared and Jesse. I had a chance to meet them and some of the other roughnecks I had worked with. Kelly as maid of honor and myself as best man were kind of thrown together for the entire evening. There were pictures, seating at the bride and groom's table, and traditional dancing. I don't think we should have been forced to spend time together. In fact, we couldn't have been separated with a crowbar either. We spent the evening enjoying each other's company because we wanted to. Needless to say, everyone present had a good time. In the first week of the honeymoon, I called Billy Ray at least every other day to figure out how to handle unexpected problems. By the third week, he was having to call me to find out what was going on. I had already gotten into the job and was doing a good job. The newlyweds decided to extend their trip for another 2 weeks because the business was in good hands. I was glad when they came home and I was able to return to my old job and get rid of my duties as boss of Jones Oil. While her new stepfather and mother were away, Kelly and I continued to meet a couple times a week for dinner and have little adventures on the weekends. After the new couple returned, we saw no reason to stop spending time together. What's more, I had more time when Billy Ray returned, and we increased our date nights, both in number and activities. By the end, Kelly and I were no longer just good buddies spending time together. We were halfway in love with each other, and we were starting to talk about us. I came to the conclusion that I could no longer wallow in self-pity and shut people out. I might get hurt again, but I decided that I couldn't go through life afraid to love someone or to have someone love me. In this case, Kelly. I knew she could hurt me, but I decided it was worth the risk. Every time I started hinting or talking about taking our relationship to a higher level, she would smoothly change the subject or make me talk about something else. Now I know that usually women want to clarify a relationship. But given my history, I wanted to know if I was setting myself up to get hurt again. Basically, I wanted Kelly and I to be we and not just Kelly and me. Hell of a twist for me, you have no idea. One Friday night after dinner, Kelly suggested we go dancing. We had already been to a couple of neighborhood bars and danced a few times, but she wanted to go to a big dance hall. She wanted to go to the Ranch. I wasn't thrilled with her choice as I still have bad memories with that place. I thought that maybe this was another step I should take to get rid of the baggage in my life. We got to the honky tonk, and it wasn't too crowded since it was only about 8 o'clock and it started filling up around 10 o'clock. Kelly and I were just getting back to our table after dancing when the same damn devil who ruined my life earlier jumped up to us. Remember him? I pushed Kelly's chair back and she was already seated when I heard it. Hey, Jason. Good to see you. It was Marcia, and with her favorite of the night, or week, or whatever, another urban cowboy. When I saw Marcia, I felt again all the anger and resentment I had felt so long ago. Feelings that I thought I had put in the past. She was still very beautiful, but she had a stern look about her. If she had been a horse, I would have said she had been ridden a lot and was wet. Marcia stood waiting to see what I would say to her. Hi, Marcia, I said without enthusiasm. I haven't seen you in a year and a half or so? How have you been? Marcia looked at Kelly like a rattlesnake under a bush. Aren't you going to introduce us? It was the last thing I wanted to do, but I was kind of stuck at a dry well. Kelly, this is Marcia, my ex-wife. Marcia, is Kelly mine? I hesitated a bit. Had I introduced Kelly as a friend, a girlfriend, or what? Hi, I'm Kelly Vollmer, Jason's fiancée. Nice to meet you, said Kelly and saved me. There was a challenge in her voice. Marcia was a little shocked at the word bride. To be honest, so was I, but I tried not to show it. Good old Marcia didn't let the call go unanswered and said, give me a call, Jason, and we can get together to talk about old times. After all, it can't be that two old friends can't have lunch or something, can it? I was steaming. First I was mad at myself for the feelings that meeting Marcia had caused me. Then I was mad at Marcia for trying to put Kelly down by telling me to call her, and for the way she looked at Kelly. All in all, I was angrier than ever. No, I won't call you Marcia. We have nothing to talk about at lunch or anywhere else. We're not friends, and I don't want anything to do with you. I told you when we broke up to go to hell. And I haven't changed my mind. Go to hell and leave me alone. I took Kelly's hand and started to lead her toward my truck. I shouldn't have done what I did then, it was petty and beneath me, but I couldn't resist. I said, "Come on, Kelly, let's go, something stinks in here." Marcia Ann's cowboy was 4 or 5 years younger than me and shorter in stature. He was huskier than I was, which apparently gave him courage, and he puffed up to challenge me. "We don't talk like that to our women where I come from," he said in a fake Texas accent. "Then go back where you came from, boy," I replied. My anger seemed to take over my common sense, and I felt like punching someone. Kelly stepped between us and said to the young man, "Buddy, you're about to make a bad career move. It would be better for all of us to leave." Marcia Ann grabbed the guy's arm and pulled him toward the dance floor with the words, "Come on, Bobby Joe, he'll kill you if you fight him. I've seen him hurt men before. He's just a beast." As we walked to the car, I mumbled something to myself. I opened the door for Kelly, got behind the wheel, and drove off, still muttering to myself. When we pulled up to her house, she turned to me and silently asked for an explanation. I think she was a little upset, her eyes drilling me like a laser. I told her I was very disappointed in myself. That all the old anger and resentment came back when I saw Marcia and I thought I had put it all behind me. She nodded as I spoke and said she understood. "What about that bride story you told Marcia Ann?" That really surprised me. It seemed to me that Marcia Ann was trying to put spurs in you, so I decided to give her back some of her own medicine. Make no mistake, she didn't need to come by our table, she did it on purpose. She wanted to torture you a little. I thought that by introducing myself as your fiancé I would set her back a step or two. Kelly smiled proudly at me. One good thing about seeing Marcia Ann tonight is that it showed me that I had no feelings left for her except the anger I showed tonight. That's gone now, too. She hasn't aged that well, I guess her partying lifestyle is taking its toll. She looks heavy. What feelings do you think you still have for her, Jason? Kelly's steady gaze made it impossible for me not to answer truthfully. I guess I missed her and thought that maybe I still loved her a little, despite what she did. I know now that I didn't. I missed my family. My wife and maybe my kids. That's what I missed, not Marcia Ann. I was being as honest as possible. So where does that leave us, Kelly? Remember how I used to change the subject when you started talking about a more serious relationship? The reason for that was those residual feelings you were talking about. I could tell that you had something unresolved about Marcia Ann, and until you worked it out, I didn't want to get close to you. I didn't want to love you and then get rejected, Kelly said. I'm free now, Kelly. I love you and I know all my ghosts are gone. Will you marry me? Are you sure this is what you want? Yeah, I'm sure you did. The only reason I didn't ask before is because you seemed to blow me off when I came close to asking you before. Please, will you marry me? The hugs and kisses we exchanged in the front seat of my truck that night answered that question for me. Kelly and I have been engaged for a year and the wedding is in 2 weeks. The long engagement was to make sure all my demons were killed. They were. Billy Ray will have to run things without me for about a month because Kelly and I are planning to go on a long honeymoon. We are going to visit the Grand Canyon and go down to Phantom Ranch. This will be my second visit, but it will be a new adventure for Kelly. After that, we will be heading to Laughlin to spend a few days at my friend Ron's house. He has promised us VIP treatment. When we leave Laughlin, Kelly and I will be traveling to a cattle drive in Colorado. We will be helping to move a herd of cattle from the high mountain pastures back to a ranch in the lower valley. If we have time, I'll take Kelly to see the Pacific Ocean. None of this is very romantic, but the romance will be in being together. We need to spend time while we can, because when we get back, I'll have a new job. I'm going to be in charge at Jones Oil. Billy Ray is going to retire when we get back, and he's made me a full partner. He says a man will always work harder for himself than for someone else. Betty Sue said it was just an excuse to do something nice for Kelly and me, plus it would keep the family together. I'll say it again, it's good to have friends. A quote. Life goes on.